Alcohol may be the oldest accident humanity decided to repeat on purpose. Long before bottles, bars, or written recipes, somebody left something sweet or starchy sitting around. Wild yeast found it, ate the sugars, and produced ethanol and carbon dioxide. The result smelled strange, tasted different, and changed the way people felt. We do not know who first took a second sip. We probably never will. But archaeology shows that humans learned to make fermented drinks thousands of years before they learned to write. This is not simply the history of getting drunk. Alcoholic beverages have been food, medicine, wages, religious offerings, trade goods, political targets, and symbols of identity. Their story follows the rise of farming, cities, empires, global commerce, modern science, and public health. In a way, the history of alcohol is a slightly blurry history of civilization itself. The basic chemistry is surprisingly simple. Yeast consumes sugar in an oxygen-poor environment and produces alcohol. Sweet fruit juice can ferment directly. Honey mixed with water can become mead. Grain is more difficult because its energy is stored as starch, so brewers first have to convert that starch into fermentable sugar. Early people did not understand microorganisms, but they learned the process through observation, repetition, and taste. One of the oldest proposed examples comes from Raqefet Cave in present-day Israel. Researchers examining stone mortars at this Natufian burial site found evidence consistent with cereal-based beer production roughly 13,000 years ago. The drink was probably nothing like a cold modern lager. It may have been thick, sour, cloudy, and low in alcohol. The setting matters as much as the recipe. The researchers connected it with ritual feasts honoring the dead. Alcohol appears in the archaeological record not as a private luxury but as part of a social gathering. The evidence becomes clearer at Jiahu, a Neolithic village in what is now Henan Province, China. Chemical traces inside pottery jars show that people around 7000 BC made a mixed fermented drink from rice, honey, and fruit, probably hawthorn fruit or wild grapes. Modern labels such as beer, wine, and mead do not fit neatly here. The beverage crossed all three categories. Early drink makers used whatever sugars their landscape offered. A separate tradition emerged around grapes. At sites in Georgia and the South Caucasus, pottery dating to about 6000 to 5800 BC contained chemical evidence of grape wine. Grapes are unusually convenient for fermentation because their juice is rich in sugar and their skins naturally carry yeast. Once communities began tending vines, selecting useful plants, and storing juice in large pottery vessels, wine could become a dependable product rather than a seasonal surprise. Farming transformed alcohol. Grain, rice, dates, grapes, and honey could be collected in larger quantities. Pottery made liquids easier to ferment and store. Settled communities could pass recipes from one generation to the next. This does not prove the popular claim that humans invented farming just to make beer. Bread and porridge mattered too, and the evidence is more complicated. But brewing and agriculture clearly reinforced each other. In Mesopotamia, beer became woven into urban life. Cuneiform records track grain and beer rations, including distributions to workers. Beer was nourishment, compensation, and administration in a cup. It appeared in myths and religious offerings. Because ancient beer was often unfiltered, people could drink it through long straws that helped avoid floating grain husks. A shared vessel with several straws was both practical and social, although it would be a difficult concept to sell in a modern sports bar. Ancient Egypt also ran on beer and wine. Beer was a common staple, while wine often carried greater status. Tomb scenes show brewing, grape harvesting, pressing, storage, banquets, and the consequences of overindulgence. Jars were marked with information about origin and production, an ancestor of the modern wine label. Alcohol accompanied meals, labor, festivals, temple offerings, and burials. A person could need beer in this life and apparently in the next one too. Around the Mediterranean, wine became a powerful cultural language. Greek symposia were organized drinking gatherings where elite men mixed wine with water, talked, performed, played games, and displayed status. Drinking unmixed wine was often portrayed as uncivilized, which is a useful reminder that every drinking culture invents rules and then judges outsiders by them. The Greeks associated wine with Dionysus. The Romans called him Bacchus. Roman expansion spread vineyards, presses, amphorae, and drinking customs across much of Europe. Wine was traded over long distances and produced on large estates, but quality and access varied sharply. Alcohol could build community while also revealing class, gender, citizenship, and power. Alcohol was never limited to the Mediterranean world. Communities across Africa fermented sorghum, millet, palm sap, bananas, and honey. In the Americas, people made drinks from maize, agave, cassava, cactus fruit, and other local plants. Chicha took many forms in the Andes, while pulque developed from fermented agave sap in Mesoamerica. Across northern Europe, grain ales and honey drinks flourished where grapes grew poorly. Fermentation was not one invention moving outward from a single birthplace. It was a recurring human solution discovered and refined in many environments. Religions treated alcohol in very different ways. Wine became central to Jewish ritual and later Christian communion. Buddhist traditions commonly warned against intoxicants. Islamic scripture prohibited intoxicating drink, yet the history of alcohol in Muslim societies was not a simple story of instant disappearance. Wine poetry, medical writing, legal debate, and actual drinking practices continued to vary across time and place. Rules surrounding alcohol often reveal the tension between an ideal society and the society people actually live in. The next major technological shift was distillation. Fermentation alone reaches a natural limit because high alcohol levels eventually disable the yeast. Distillation heats a fermented liquid and captures components according to their different boiling behavior, concentrating the alcohol. Ancient experimenters used forms of distillation for perfumes, medicines, and other substances. Scholars in the Greek, Persian, Arab, Indian, Chinese, and European worlds contributed to its development. Potable spirits became increasingly important during the medieval period, but there was no single cinematic moment when one inventor pulled the first bottle of liquor from a machine. Distilled drinks changed the scale of intoxication. Brandy, whiskey, vodka, arrack, baijiu, and other spirits packed more alcohol into a smaller volume and traveled well. At first, they were frequently sold as medicine. The phrase water of life appears in names such as aqua vitae, eau de vie, and whiskey's Gaelic ancestor. Apparently, medicine has always benefited from optimistic branding. During the early modern era, improved stills and expanding trade created new drinks and new problems. Gin grew from a Dutch medicinal spirit into a mass-market drink in England. In the 18th century gin craze, cheap spirits became associated with poverty, disorder, and political panic, prompting new taxes and licensing laws. Governments repeatedly discovered a lasting contradiction. Alcohol could damage public order, but taxing it could produce excellent revenue. Rum tied alcohol to one of the darkest systems in global history. Caribbean plantations turned sugarcane juice and molasses into a profitable spirit. Rum circulated through Atlantic trade networks built on colonization and enslaved labor. European drinking fashions, plantation wealth, maritime commerce, and human exploitation became inseparable. A cheerful cocktail could rest on an extremely violent supply chain. Beer changed too. Hops, long used in parts of continental Europe, gradually displaced many other bittering mixtures because they added flavor and helped preservation. In England, hopped beer arrived as a foreign style and competed with traditional unhopped ale. Industrialization then transformed brewing. Thermometers, hydrometers, steam power, refrigeration, railroads, glass bottles, and mechanized factories made production more consistent and distribution much wider. In the 19th century, Louis Pasteur showed that living microorganisms drive fermentation. Brewers had worked with yeast for millennia without knowing what yeast actually did. Scientific control over microbial life reduced spoilage and made predictable large-scale production possible. Refrigeration also helped lager brewing spread internationally, creating the pale, crisp beer style that now seems timeless but is historically quite recent. Industrial alcohol provoked industrial resistance. Temperance movements linked drinking with poverty, violence, family hardship, and dangerous working conditions. Some activists sought moderation, others demanded prohibition. In the United States, the 18th Amendment took effect in 1920, banning the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquor. It did reduce some drinking, but it also encouraged illegal production, smuggling, corruption, and organized crime. The amendment was repealed in 1933. Prohibition showed that a government could ban the legal market more easily than it could erase demand,